Hey guys, welcome to Thinking Theology. I'm Don, hope you're having a good day. Today I'm looking at a topic that it's upsetting to some people, but that's okay. We're just going to sort of look through some ideas and then you pick out, which arguments seem to make sense to you or not. Are science and Christianity opposed to one another? Or I could broaden it and say, are science and religion opposed to one another? And where this idea got its push, in a sense, is from a verse in the New Testament. And we'll get into that, but it's sort of like the question that might be asked is there some secret invisible force out there, whether you call it the devil or devil spirits, trying to infiltrate the world to keep people from knowing Jesus, or that for Jews that the Messiah will come, or for Christians that he'll return, and all of this? We're going to look at this to see whether or not the scientific community is playing a role, even if they don't know about it. I've heard a number of teachings that whenever the scientific community comes out with some idea, or archaeologists come out with some idea, that the human race is, 200,000 years old, or what have you, or that remains were found 40,000 years ago in Africa, and human remains were there, but the Bible says we're only 6,000 years old in Genesis and so forth. But this is where the idea came from in Christian circles, certainly fundamentalist Christian circles, who read the King James Bible, that science is opposed to Christianity, for example. And it's in 1 Timothy, okay, and I'm going to read that. I'll put it up on the screen here. 1 Timothy 6:20-21. That says, Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings, and oppositions of science falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. So there you go. We've got oppositions of science. So now we've got this one word that seems to encapsulate for all time the notion that what human beings study and label as science are opposed to Christian ideas. Okay, but now I'll read that from the NIV version. All right, and the NIV says this: Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge, which some have professed and in so doing have departed from the faith. So there you have the translational difference. And an entire body of theology has permeated some Christian circles that say that science is bad. But when you see that this word knowledge, this comes from the Greek word gnosis, Gnosis, which just generally is translated as knowledge. And all that's being said here is for Timothy to not go after doctrines that he hadn't been taught. It's pretty much that simple. So, as it is, anytime you hold a particular opinion or belief and think or believe that it is true, of course, anything that says something different is going to be considered wrong, or in this case, false. But that the word science was ever used in here is used to discredit any scientific finding that comes down the pike. Now, a couple of things. The name of the channel, Thinking Theology, is just designed to get people thinking more, to sort of look at things possibly from more inclusive perspectives, if you will, and in some cases less inclusive perspectives, just by using what you want to call the rule of logic or just common sense. That's what it's designed for. So I'm going to present a couple things for you to think about. One is that science certainly is this broad sphere of human endeavor and learning, which just involves making connections. Like if you let something go out of your hand 5,000 times, and all 5,000 times it falls straight down. It doesn't float. It doesn't go sideways. It doesn't go up. It 5,000 times, and you say to yourself as a human being, well, that pattern repeats itself every single time. What does that mean? What is the cause of that? Now, that type of learning, that type of seeking understanding is no different than what people do when we read the biblical texts, where we try to make connections between words and concepts and ideas. So the ruling out of thought, because it pertains to that which you can see, is improper, because common sense applies whether you're studying some physical thing or some ideological or quote unquote spiritual thing. In other words, reason is reason no matter where we apply it. Things still need to make sense. Now, interestingly, this word science has only been used twice in the King James Bible. Once in the New Testament that I just read in Timothy, and the other is in the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible. And I'm going to read that, and you'll see the difference between how it was understood then as this word science is used in this version of the Bible, the King James, okay? Daniel 1, verses 3 and 4. And the king, which is Nebuchadnezzar, and the king Nebuchadnezzar spoke unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. So here we have all glowing terminologies. There was great learning to be had. They were without blemish. They were with understanding, with wisdom, and they understood science. And so this is the first application of that word science in the Bible. Now, it might be more appropriately translated as knowledge there as well, but knowledge is just a broad construct, if you will. It's how we come to, at first we come up with an idea, a theory, then we test it, we think about it, and then we call it we call it knowledge, we call it belief, we have trust in it that it's going to work a certain way. So whether we label something as science or whether we label it as religion, the impetus is like, just don't believe things that don't make sense. That's it. It doesn't matter. If I see something falling 5,000 times in a row and not a single time does it go up, and I say, wow, this is interesting how things float. It's like, no, it would be interesting if you could show that they float, but they don't. They go straight down or what have you. So I wanted to point out one thing for those who might be sort of conspiracy theorists about science. Getting published in a scientific journal is an absurdly arduous process. And it goes like this, for any who thinks that any group of people is in agreement with one another. I don't care what group of people you take. You could take Orthodox Jews, you could take Mormons, you could take Muslim, you could take atheists. Across the board, you put two people in the room and you have disagreement. You put three in a room and you probably have a mutiny on your hands. You take thousands or millions, there's not universal agreement among them, okay? So the idea that the scientific community could be somehow in cahoots, think about it in light of what it takes to get published. The scientific method is this. Once you come up with a new theory, a new idea, the first thing you do as a scientist is try to disprove it. You don't do advocacy research going out to try to find support for it. You don't have confirmation bias trying to find support. The first thing you do, the first principle is find the fault with it. Find what's wrong with it. And if you can't, and it can be hard because you found something you think is new, you're excited, so you tend to want to show that it's right rather than prove yourself wrong. But if you can find what's wrong with your own new theory, you hand it off to friends, colleagues who are familiar with that subject matter. Maybe it's physics, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. You give it to them and say, here's my idea. Find the flaws with it. Now let's say they go over it for a month or a week or whatever it takes them, and they come back and say, it looks pretty good. I couldn't find any problems with your proofs for this thing or your experiments and so forth. Then you take it and you hand it to people who really know their stuff. Maybe you work at a university and you hand it to all your colleagues in the department, or you send it out to other colleagues around the country or world. Find the flaws with this. You know this field really well. Find the flaws with it. And they come back and they say, it looks pretty good. Then you submit it to the publication. You say, whatever the publication is in your field, say, here is my new theory. And then they look at it and they try to poke holes in it. And then if they, the editors, can't poke holes in it, they hand it to their experts before they publish it to say, find the flaws with this thing. And if it comes back that it's okay, then it gets published. And after it gets published, the people reading it are all trying to poke holes in it. Okay? So that's the scientific method. If something survives that scrutiny, there is some basis for it. Because human reasoning is human reasoning. Okay? It doesn't matter. You know, if a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Mormon, an atheist, anybody drops a ball and sees it going down 5,000 times, it goes down 5,000 times. It doesn't matter who's observing it. It doesn't make anyone more right or more wrong. Now, contrast that with getting published in a Christian publication. It's a lot easier. You really just need some basic understanding. But if you come out and contradict something, then you're not going to get in a publication. Not readily. You will not get in a publication if you disagree with some notion that's already out there. Whether it's the doctrine of the Trinity, whether it's water baptism, whatever. If you contradict something, you're not getting in. So there's a difference between the scientific community's approach as far as whether there's a conspiracy, so to speak, or this universal agreement. Scientists, mathematicians, physicists, cosmologists, archaeologists are all trying to disprove one another's work. Not in a mean-spirited way, but because they want to have things that make more sense, that you can draw from the basic premise or basic theory and prove different experiments and show different ways in which it actually works. People are trying to disprove it every step of the way. If it survives that, you've got something. And that's it. So I just wanted to point that out. Leave your thoughts on that. Agree, disagree. Either way is fine. Get some discussion on this stuff. This is about thinking theology, so the incorporation of other bits of knowledge, other fields of knowledge is welcome. Put it that way. So if it makes sense, it makes sense. That's it. All right, guys, have a great day. See you in another video. Please subscribe and keep thinking theology.